Hey guys, welcome back to the Second Time Lucky Mining channel. In today's video, we are going to have a look at the Flux Testnet. If you do like the Flux content, please like the video and maybe consider subscribing to the channel. It will help me out a great deal. But enough of plugging my channel, let's jump into the Flux Testnet. Now, first off, what is the Flux Testnet? And the way that I like to look at it is a quality test environment or a testing environment that should be the same as the Flux current productive environment. But it not being the productive environment allows users like you or me or even the Flux team to test various different either functionality. And in today's video, I wanted to test some specific hardware just to make sure that it is passing benchmarks and I'm familiar with the process. Now, what do I use the actual Flux Testnet for? And what I've done in the past, and if you haven't watched that video, I'll leave a link in the video description and tag it at the top, but I used it at the first time to test my Raspberry Pi to make sure, number one, because I was new to the Flux ecosystem, I wasn't sure exactly how the installation process works. I was new to Linux and I wanted to learn Linux without me investing in 1,000 Flux, which is the minimum, or 12,500 Flux or 40,000 Flux, right? So the Flux Testnet, at least for me, is a great environment for me, first off, to test my hardware to make sure that they will pass benchmarks without me having to fork out real money to buy actual Flux and then test, only to find out that my hardware is not sufficient, and then I have all of that capital sitting and waiting. So that's really what I use the testnet for, is number one, for testing and learning, so to making sure that I understand how Linux works, I can update, I can install a Flux node, and number two, to make sure that I can test my own hardware, right? So I can test my desktop computer, I can test the VPS, a Raspberry Pi, a Jetson, it doesn't really matter, you can test any specific hardware on the testnet and it should behave exactly the same as what it does in the production environment. The added benefit of that is you don't actually have to put in any money. So, you just ask for some test coins and you can go about testing, right? So it's a hassle-free or cost-free testing version of Flux that you can play around with. Now that you know what the Flux Testnet is, what I'm going to do is jump on the computer and show you guys how do you go about installing a Flux node on the testnet, and then we'll have a look at a couple of benchmarks. So I've got a Contabo VPS already imaged and ready for us to go and play with. So let's jump onto the computer. Okay, so here we go on the computer. Now, the first thing that we would need is the testnet instructions. And the best place, and possibly the only place where you would find that, is on the Flux Discord. Now, within the Discord, if I just scroll a little bit down, there's a specific section here that deals with the testnet. So there's a couple of channels specifically in here, but the one that we will look at first is the testnet instructions. So in this section here, there's a detailed view of what you would need. And the short version of it is, number one, we would need to download a specific version of Zelcore, and the link is in here. We will then go and add the Flux test coin, so I'll show you guys how to do that. We would then paste our address into the request coin section, where some of the Flux team members will send us coins, and again, depending on what you want to test, they will send you the appropriate coin. So we'll just do that. Then the third thing is, once that is set up, we will actually go and install a Flux node, but we will specifically use the testnet multi-toolbox. So that's the important thing here. From that point onwards, it's very similar to any other Flux VPS that you've installed. So if you haven't watched my previous video, I'll leave a link in the video description and tag it at the top, but it would be the same specific process. Once you have installed the Flux node, that's now when you can have a look at the benchmarks and do whatever you want to do with that. From there, however, it is possible to install or go back to the mainnet, and again, I'll show you guys how to do that. But in short terms, it will just be, we will just go back to the multi-toolbox, but the live or productive toolbox, and then go with option 2 and specify node to use new details. But I'll show you guys how to do that. Okay, so now that we know where the instructions are and what that is, let's go ahead and actually start. Now, the first step in the process is I would need to download a specific version of Zelcore, which is the beta version here, and Walter has specified the link to the GitHub. So I'm just going to specify that. It will open up the GitHub, so just make sure you are in the GitHub. And then from here, I'm going to download the specific beta version of Zelcore. which is this exe one. So I'm just going to click on that, and my system would go ahead and download that specific version of Zelcore. So from here, I would just specify open. And what will happen now is, in my case, because I'm using Windows 11, it will come up with this protection issue. I'm just going to specify more and run anyway, so I'm happy with the risks. And what will happen is a specific version of Zelcore is going to open. How do you want to make sure that you do have the correct version? So in the bottom left here, you would see there is the beta build that will come up. Now, if you've done this before, you would specify your username and password, but I would highly encourage you guys, if you want to do this type of testing on the testnet, is create a separate account specifically for testing. And for that, you would just go register and then create a separate testing username and password with keys. So I would highly encourage you to keep your main Zelcore wallet separate to what you want to test with. Now, in my case, I've already set up a user, so I'm not going to specify that. So I'm just going to log into my test user. Okay, so now that I've logged in, what will happen is you will land specifically on your wallets page. Now, what you would see here is I've obviously done this before, and here you can see I've got my Flux Test coin and within a specific wallet, but you wouldn't have anything specifically in here. Now, the first thing that you would need to go and do is actually switch off the automatic updates. And for that, you would go settings and then disable the automatic update. So that's the first thing that you would need to go and do, is disable the automatic updates. Now, the next thing that we will go and have to do is add the Flux Test coin to a specific wallet. Now, I've made a mistake in this before, and let's have a look at it. So I'm going to use my mining wallet as an example here. So within this mining wallet, what I'm going to do is manage assets, and then I'm going to specify add assets. And in here, I'm going to specify Flux, and what will come up is the normal Flux network items, right? But if I scroll a little bit down, you would see test network coins. So it's important that you add the test network coins. I've made the mistake before, or the first time that I've done it, I've just added normal Flux. I didn't know there was a difference. So that's just the important thing to note. So I'm just going to specify that. If I hit close, you would see now that Flux Test coin is added to my mining wallet. And this is the wallet or the address that I will now use to ask for 1,000 test Flux coins. Now that we've got the test coin here, we need to actually get the collateral that we would want to use to stake and stand up a node on the testnet. Now, for that, what I'm going to do is request a amount, and because the environment that I've got is a Cumulus environment, I'm going to ask for 1,000 coins. Now, how do I go about that? You can see currently I've got 0 test Flux. What I would do is just select Flux coin. I would then specify receive, and what's important here, you will specify, or you will see that your address actually starts with TM. So TM means it's the testnet. If it's T1, it would be a real address. So it's important just to make note of your address. So if it's TM, you know you're asking for the correct address, which is the test coin address. So I'm just going to specify, come back to the Discord. So again, in the Discord, there's a specific channel that says testnet request coins. So I'm just going to specify in here, please send me 1,000 test to address, and then I'm gonna specify my address here. And what will now happen is, as soon as somebody is online, Walter or somebody from the team, they would actually send me 1,000 test points. Now, it's important to just be a little bit patient here. These guys are looking at various different other issues, so as soon as they get time, they will come and send you 1,000 Flux. So in this case, I'm just going to be a little bit patient. Now, after waiting patiently, there would be a team member that would send you the 1,000 Flux, and here you can see it's now popped up into my mining wallet, and specifically 1,000 because that's specifically what I requested. Now, if I select it here, what we would now need to do is stake the 1,000 test Flux, and that's the exact same process as what you would normally do to start a Flux node or to stake specifically for a Flux node. And the process for that is just go receiving address here. I'm going to specify or select my receiving address. I will actually go and send, and specify my Zel ID. And it's something that I didn't mention here, but you would need to have your Zel ID set up, and for that you would just go to apps and Zel ID just to set it up. But I would specify or paste my exact same address in here. So this is basically sending the 1000 test flux to myself, which will trigger the staking. So I would then send 1000 exactly and then send it. Now, once you've staked it, you would actually see it now specifies here in my test flux locked in flux node 1000. So you can see it's actually sent it. So if I just go one step back, within my mining wallet, I've now staked it. But just to get the actual details and make sure it's there, what I'm going to do is go back to apps and then flux nodes. And then what I'm specifically looking for here, you can see I've got the message where it said added one flux node to my flux node. So you would see the top node here. If I just open it up, or maybe it's the one at the bottom, or one of these ones, it's probably this one here. This is the new one that I've now staked. Now the details that we're going to use to set up the node, again, as per normal, we would find in this edit section here. So the private key, collateral ID, and output index is what we are now going to go and use to set up the flux node. Now the next step, once we've staked, is actually to log into the VPS and start the installation process. Now for that, your options may vary. You might use your own computer or a VPS or a Raspberry Pi or whatever you have, and your process might differ. In my case, what I've played around with in the past, and I'm just minimizing all of my icons here, is the Oracle VM. So if I use my desktop to set up a node specifically, so I've done that before. And then I've got a couple of VPSs that I've used in the past, and then obviously my Raspberry Pi as well. And how do I normally access those is with PuTTY, but it depends on how you want to do it. You can do it in the command prompt as well, but in my case, I'm now going to log into my Contabo VPS and actually start the process. Now in my case, I'm just going to load up the IP. It's going to ask me, this is the first time that I'm logging into it. Am I happy with that? I'm going to say yes. It's going to ask me for a root password, so I'm going to specify that and then enter my password and then give it a second. Hopefully it loads in. Again, probably a second, and there you would see it's opening up my Contabo screen. So I'm just going to move it a little bit in the middle and then make it a little bit bigger so we can see nicely. And that's now where I am going to start the installation process. Now this is a newly imaged VM, so what I like to do normally is just install the updates, and there's typically two commands that I use for that, is sudo apt update, and this will actually just get the latest versions of the various different software that I would need. So again, that process might take a little bit of time. And then you can see here it says 3 packages are available to update. So for that, I would then just go sudo apt upgrade. So the one is update and the other one is upgrade. And now it would go about installing those packages. So you would see it will ask me, do you want to continue? I say yes. And again, it might take a little bit of time, but just give it time to finish. Okay, so once the updates are done updating, what I like to do is just reboot the system. So I would go sudo reboot, and that will actually go and reboot the actual system. So that ensures that the updates number 1 is installed and then the system is rebooted. So again, what I'll have to do is now log back into the system. Now the system has rebooted successfully and I'm back logged into the system. Now what I like to do is just install the 2 components that I need specifically for the installation, and for that what I like to do is, if I go back to my web page here, go back to the node installation, is run these 2 commands from the official guide. Again, I'll leave a link in the video description just in case you wanted to have a look at it, but the one is to install curl, which is this one here. So I'll just copy and paste that and then go back here, paste it in, and then it will go and install curl. So that would be the one step. The other step would be the npm. So I'll do the same thing here, specify that in there, and then that will install that. So these are what I consider the prerequisites before you start the process, right? And again, if you were doing a full node installation, you would be doing the exact same thing. And that's why I like using the testnet, because it gives you an idea of the various different steps. There's only one or two nuances for this. Again, you would use a Flux test coin, and then the actual multi-toolbox, which we'll come back to a little bit later, is slightly different for the testnet. But those are, at least in my opinion, the only two differences. So you'll get a good idea of what the process is. Now I'll let this go for a little bit of a while until it's finished. Okay, so those two requirements finished installing. Now what I would now go ahead and do is start the installation process. Now if I go back to my web page, normally the next step in the process would be to run the multi-toolbox. And again, in this specific scenario, because I'm installing on the testnet, I'm not going to do this. And that's where I'm going to go back to Discord. So if I just minimize this, open up Discord and go back to the test instructions, this is now where I need to execute. If I scroll a little bit up, this is now where, when I have done my installation, I actually need to go to the multi-toolbox specifically for the testnet. So what I like to look at here again is this testnet at the back. This just makes sure that I'm actually installing it on a testnet. So for that, I'm just going to copy this bash command here. By the way, this bash command won't work if you haven't done the previous step here, but I'm just going to right click to paste into putty, and it will now start the multi-toolbox on the testnet. So I'll just give it a second to start that specific process. And here you would see the multi-toolbox now opens. Now you can see the options are a little bit less compared to what you would see in the productive environment, because it does a whole lot more. But for our process here, the two options that I'm going to do today is install Docker, which is normally the first step, and then install the Flux node. So these are the two things that we are going to go and do. Okay, so let's start the process, and the first step would be to install Docker. So for that, I'm going to select option 1 and hit enter. It's going to ask me for a username. In this case, I'm going to say Cumulus. It's going to ask for a password, so I'm just going to give it a new password. I'll have to retype that password, and then it would now go about installing Docker. So again, just give it a couple of minutes. It might take a little bit of time. Okay, after a little bit of time, Docker has finished installing, and the next step in the process would be asking you to switch user. In this case, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to hit Y, and what you would see, it's now changing the name to Cumulus here. Now again, what I'm going to do is copy and paste the so let me just do that. Whoops, not that one, the bash one here. So I'm going to go back to the multi-toolbox and now go to the next step, which is installing the Flux node. So that option is option 2, so I'm just going to hit that, and then you would see it's going to ask me for the password. And again, I've specified that password the previous step, so I'm just going to enter that password, make sure I enter it correctly. And now it's going to start the installation process of the Flux node. After a bit of time, it's now asking, detecting port 22 or using 22 as SSH. Is that correct? I'm going to say yes. And you can see it's done a lot of other things, removing some services, installing some packages. So you just need to be a little bit patient and give it a little bit of time. After a little bit of time, it's now asking for my details. Here you can see it's now asking for the private key. Now for that, what I'm going to do is go back to Zelcore here. I'm logged in already, so what might have happened in your case, you might have been logged out. So for that, I'm just going to go back to apps, go to Flux nodes, and here you would still see your collateral here, and I think it was the second one, so it's this one here that's got 65 confirmation. So the other important thing is you can't start the node until there's 100, so it's just important to keep track of that. I do think the testnet runs a little bit quicker compared to the production environment, or at least the block times may be a little bit quicker for testing purposes. But in here, what I'm going to specify is edit, and then select the private key here, and then go back to my installation. paste that in. It's going to ask for my collateral, and again that I'll find here, and then go back here and then specify that, and then it asks for the output, which I can read on the screen as saying 0 there. Just gonna put that in, and then the next step is it's gonna continue with the installation process. So I'm still going to get the Zel ID prompt, so I'll just give it a little bit of time or wait patiently until I do get that. So I'm just gonna hit cancel here for now, and then wait till I get to that specific section. After a little while, you can see it's now asking for my Zel ID, and it's specifying exactly where to get it, right? So apps Zel ID, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go apps Zel ID, copy my Zel ID, and then paste it into here. And what you will notice is there's a couple of stuff that happened in the background until we've last looked at it. It's installed the benchmarks, it's installed MongoDB, Node.js, and it's done a couple of things. Now, what it will do next is actually start the daemon and start syncing the chain. So this might take a little bit of time. So just again, be patient around the completion of this. It's almost done. We're on the last leg. Syncing the blockchain took actually a lot of time. You can see here 61 minutes. So it took a long time, but it's now restarting the benchmark. So it should almost be done. So we'll give it another couple of minutes until it's finished. Okay, after waiting patiently, we are at last done. And here you can see the total duration for the installation was 84 minutes. So it took a long time. I think syncing the blockchain was the majority of that time. So that was about 60 minutes. It took about an hour. So that was the majority of the time. Now, if I wanted to go and have a look at my benchmarks, what you can do is you can actually check your benchmark straight from here. So you can go Flux Testnet benchmark here. So you can copy and paste this command in. So if I do that and then just right click it in here, it actually shows you your benchmarks here. So you can see it's actually passing all the benchmarks. I can see the cores. I can see that this write speed is more than what I need. The SSD size, the EPS score. So all of the things is passing the benchmarks. Now, another way that you can do it, if I just scroll a little bit up here, and this is actually the way that I like to do it, is just to look in my browser. So normally I copy and paste. If I just go back up here, copy and paste my IP and this double dots 161.26. So if I do that and go back to my browser and paste that in, it shows you actually the Flux OS screen. And what I like to look at here as well is make sure that my Flux OS version is also correct, because that's something else that will become an issue as soon as you go to the mainnet. Probably not a big issue on the testnet because we just installed this, but it's just good practice to just make sure you've got the correct Flux OS. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is if I just go benchmarks, I go Flux node and go get benchmarks. If there was an error, it should show you here in an error, and I'll show you exactly which are the benchmarks that are failing. So here you can see my disk write speed is at least more than what it needs to be, and my CPU score is also higher than what it needs to be. So I'm passing the benchmarks on all of the fronts. So from a benchmark perspective, it's looking good. Now, since I've passed the benchmarks, what I have to do next, or what the next steps in the installation process would be, is to actually start my Flux node on the testnet. Now, for that, I'm just going to go back to my Zelcore wallet, and for that, I'm going to go to apps, and then Flux nodes, and then have a look at the keys that I used. I think it was the second one here, so it was this one. So you can see also now, since I've got more than 100 confirmations, I've actually got 244, this start button becomes active. And what I like to do here is just edit the details. So for that, I'm just going to put in here Contabo testnet, and then specify my IP. So 185.205.246.220. Right, and hit save. That'll just save the details here, and now I'm going to select start and then say start Flux node. So this will take a little bit of time, and here you can see it will change between 1 and 10 blocks ultimately. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of time and wait till it's fully confirmed. Now for that, I'm just going to hit close here. After waiting a couple of minutes, you would then see your node is now saying confirm. So that's a good sign, right? So it's currently set up. Now, to make sure that it's actually working, I'm just going to quickly have a look and see if I'm actually getting rewards. Now, for that, I'm going to go back to my portfolio and go back to my mining wallet and then go in here, and then all of a sudden you see there's rewards popping up in here. So it's happening quite frequently. The amount seems a little bit dodgy to me, 11.25, so I think there's something wrong with the calculations, but as you can see here, I'm getting a reward every couple of minutes, and the reason for that is there's not a lot of people in the queues in the testnet, so that's why you're front of the queue all the time basically on the testnet. So you feel super rich if you're playing on the testnet, but this is just a good sign that it's actually working. So I've passed the benchmarks. If I go back to Flux OS, so you can see here I've passed the benchmarks and I'm actually getting rewards. So this shows me that at least this Contabo server is working at this specific point in time. So again, if you're using VPS providers or your hardware and you're still unsure, I would definitely run this for an extended amount of time just to make sure that you don't run into issues eventually. So I'll definitely encourage that. Now, the last thing that we're going to do is, if you are now happy with the performance and you'd like to continue on to the mainnet, it's really easy. And if you go back to the instructions here, Walter did a good job showing you exactly how to do that. So if I just scroll a little bit down to get back to the mainnet, you basically run the normal multi-toolbox and select option 2. So what that looks like, and I'll just show you guys here. So if I just specify that, so I'm just going to copy that and go back into my node here. If I scroll to the bottom, if I just paste that, and this is the real multi-toolbox, so the production environment, and here you can see it looks like it does in the normal environment, right? So you can see there's the 14 options. So you don't have to start again and install Docker because that's already installed, but we need to point our collateral to the mainnet, and that's really where option 2 comes in. So we're going to select option 2 here, and then what will happen is it will start the installation process. So there's just one trick that I just want to make sure, and this is the one here. Would you like to import data from your Flux config files? In this case, you are going to say no. And the reason why you want to say no here is because it's currently using the testnet details. So you don't want to reuse that information. So you want to specify no here. What will happen is it will remove and do all of the installation. It will ask you again for your collateral. And again, this is now where you need to specify your real collateral. If you don't know how to do a installation, I would encourage you to watch my video or follow some of the Flux guides. I'll leave a link in the video description and tag it also at the top. But from this point onwards, you would just follow that normal process, starting from the step 2 function here, or actually installing the node. So you would have needed to stake your coins, and you will use that details. Now, while this is carrying on, the other thing that I would want you to do, and again, you see here, would you like to use the old chain from your daemon config? In this case, I'm going to say no again. So these are the 2 no options that you need to select. But the other thing that I just wanted to mention is, it's good practice to send back the coins that was sent to you. So, how you would go about doing that is, if you go back into your Zelcore wallet, go back to Flux nodes, and then you can basically delete the node here, right? So you'll select it, and then hit delete, and that will secure the funds back into your portfolio here, where you can now send it back to the Flux team. So you just specify what's their address, and you would be able to send it back. Now, something else to note, when you are going back to the main chain, it's important to make sure that you don't use this wallet anymore, and that you re-switch on the automatic updates. So it's just important that you remember to do those things, because it's easy to forget. And I always see it as soon as I try and open up my main wallet, it says that my updates are switched off. So that's just a little thing that if you go back to your normal wallet, the automatic updates would have been disabled. So you just need to remember to enable that again, and make sure you're using the correct wallet.
That's it for this one, guys. If you've liked the video, please like the video and consider subscribing to the channel. It will help me out a great deal. If you didn't, please specify what you would like me to change. Otherwise, I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers!